Hello friends, I am Michael Kingswood. I write fiction for fun and profit, and this is Story Time, where I share some stories with you so that you can have some fun, and you can say, hey, I like that guy and his stories. Maybe I should go buy his books. And as part of that whole motif, we are here this year going through the first book in my Glimmer Chronicles series. It's a heroic fantasy series, which is pretty awesome. They're more moderate length books than your typical fantasy doorstoppers these days, and they focus in on a few characters having adventures and doing great things. The first book is called, wait for it, Glimmer Vale, and this week we are doing chapter 14, which is called New Blood. I wrote it, but I'm not reading it. We hired a voice actor to do this one, and so let's just get right to it. Sit back and enjoy.
Chapter 14, New Blood. Raedric walked into the tap room a bit before noon. Spotting Julian almost immediately, Raedric strode quickly over to where he was chatting with the new recruits near the bar. Breakfast had helped settle Julian's stomach, but Horace's hangover cure was as miraculous as he claimed. His headache reduced to a barely noticeable throb. He smiled cheerfully as his friend arrived. Raedric's opening comment removed his smile quickly, however.
Good to see you're up and about. I've just been at the mayor's office.
That could not have been fun. Was it bad?
You could say that. I thought sure he was going to pull his hair out. He's terrified, convinced that we've brought more harm than good already.
Does he want us to leave, then? Raedric shook his head.
I offered, but he practically begged us to stay.
He sighed.
I'm not sure he knows what he really wants, except for this whole episode to be over, so we still have a job.
That's good, I suppose. Raedric shrugged, then looked past Julian to the fishing men.
Who are these guys?
Julian grinned broadly. My dear friend. He made a sweeping gesture as though he were a herald introducing an arriving dignitary. May I introduce our army? Julian had thought the morning could not get any better. The confused expression on Raedric's face proved him wrong.
What are you talking about?
Julian laughed. These fine fellows have pledged to help us against the brigands. Wagging a finger at his friend, he went on, I keep telling you, staying up late and drinking with the locals always reaps benefits. Raedric's eyebrows rose high onto his forehead. He turned to regard the fishing men for a long moment, his veteran eyes taking their individual measures in a silent appraisal. Finally, he cleared his throat and said,
Have any of you ever used a sword?
One hand went up, from a swarthy fellow in his middle years near the back of the group.
A bow?
3 more hands went up. Raedric rolled his eyes and gestured for Julian to follow him. The two friends moved several paces away. Raedric spoke softly, even though it was all but certain they were out of earshot.
What the hell good does it do us to have amateurs backing us up?
Julian knew this was coming. I've thought of that, Ray. All these fellows are strong and know how to work hard. They can learn. A soft snort was Raedric's initial response.
It takes months to learn the sword to the point where you won't accidentally stab yourself in combat. We have days, maybe a week or two.
But the brigands don't know they can't fight, do they? They look impressive enough to help with any negotiations we may do.
And when Farzal calls our bluff, then what?
Julian shrugged. The bow's a lot easier to learn than the sword, long as they stay out of reach. He spread his hands. What did Raedric want? This was far from an ideal situation, and beggars couldn't be choosers. He could tell Raedric did not like the idea at all, but he also recognized the necessity of increasing their numbers. After a brief pause, he nodded acquiescence. As Raedric moved back toward the group of fishing men, Julian heard him mumble,
Lambs to the slaughter,
under his breath. He hoped his friend's assessment was wrong, even though he secretly shared it. More loudly, Raedric said,
All right, gentlemen, it's time to learn a new trade. Meet us at the constable's office in a half hour. If you have anything that can pass for armor, a leather apron, gloves, boots, or any actual armor may be passed down through the family, bring it. Same goes for weapons. Questions?
Several of the men shook their heads, but all remained silent. Raedric nodded.
All right. A half hour.
With that, the men quickly dispersed, exiting the inn alone or in groups of 2 or 3. All moved with a sense of purpose and a serious demeanor. It was hard not to be impressed by their attitude, at least. Constable Mallory appeared surprised when Julian asked him for the use of his bows and swords.
How many?
All of them. His jaw dropped.
Why?
Raedric grinned at him.
We've got some new recruits. I don't suppose you have a place to shoot around here.
Mallory nodded.
Down this street, just past the edge of town. Vendig and I set up a few targets for practice away from where most people travel. Who are these recruits?
Just then, the swarthy man who had claimed knowledge of the sword walked into the office. Though Julian still had his doubts about him, the man had on a leather breastplate that looked at least passable, and wore a curved sword with a hand and a half hilt on his hip. He looked the part at least. "We're here," he reported. Then he turned to go. "Wait," Julian said. "What's your name?" "Salam." "Have the others come in and grab a bow and a sword, Salam." The swordsman nodded and exited the building. Constable Mallory shook his head in surprise. "I didn't know he had a sword. Hell, I didn't know he knew anything besides knots, currents, and tides. He spends more time on the boats than anyone." Mallory smirked slightly, then looked at the two friends and shook his head. "How on earth did you convince the Covington brothers to let their men off work?" "I take it they own the fishing company?" Julian asked. Mallory nodded. Julian grinned at him. "Don't need an in with the owners if you drink with the workers." The fishing men began trooping in and collecting weapons. Grinning a bit more at Mallory's renewed expression of confusion, Julian clapped him on the shoulder and followed the first pair of recruits out onto the street. It was time to figure out what he and Raedric had to work with. 3 hours later, Julian's spirits were quite a bit lower. Despite experience having taught him to expect poor performance from beginners, Horace's pledge of support combined with the fishing men's eager attitude conspired to make him forget that lesson. Julian thought sure they would be, if not skilled, at least passable. It was a struggle to claim even that much. Not that the entire group was a loss from the start. The men who earlier claimed experience with the bow all managed to get arrows down range without difficulty, and even hit the targets a time or two. Everyone else, though. Julian winced just thinking about it. Most of the men had bandages on their forearms from their bowstrings. Almost all were quite a bit less enthusiastic than they had been at the beginning.
"They did make progress,"
Raedric whispered into his ear. "A little?" More loudly, Julian said, "All right, gentlemen, that was a good start. Obviously, we've got a fair bit of ground to cover before you'll be ready for combat. We'll meet here at sunrise every day to work on it, and we won't quit until sundown, except for lunch. Before you know it, you'll be hitting bullseyes with ease." He managed not to sound ironic as he said that last. He seriously doubted many of them would progress beyond merely competent, but that was all he needed them to be. "Are we gonna work the sword, too?" asked one of the younger fishing men. Julian would have called him slender except for his bulging stomach. Everything else about him was thin as a rail. He had been the closest to promising of any of the men who had no previous experience. Julian shook his head. "Yes, but one thing at a time. Once you can get arrows downrange with some accuracy, we'll teach you how not to stab yourselves. But your default should be the bow. A sword is a lot more difficult, and frankly, we won't have time to make you proficient with it." The young man nodded, disappointment clear in his eyes. Raedric spoke up. "You're dismissed for the evening, gentlemen." The men nodded and began to disperse when Raedric added, "Salam, Hiram, Rolf, and Gilroy, please remain for a moment." The swordsman and the 3 practiced bowmen lingered as their fellows departed. Julian waited until the others were out of sight before addressing them. "Since you have more practice than the others, we're going to lean heavily on you when the time comes. Are you up for it?" Salam looked uncertain. "I'm no good with a bow." That was an understatement from what Julian had seen this afternoon. However, Raedric spent some time with him and walked away impressed with his swordsmanship. No mean trick, that. "That's why you're going to teach these 3 the basics of the sword while Ray and I focus on the others." Salam blinked in surprise, then grinned broadly and nodded. The look he gave the other 3 was almost predatory. Julian made a mental note to keep an eye on him. "In that case, we'll—" "Raedric! Julian!" Fendig's voice sounded as though he was in a near panic. What was he doing here? Julian turned around just as the deputy came to a halt and bent over, placing his hand on his knees and panting heavily. He was sweating as though he had just sprinted the entire distance from town. "What's wrong, Fendig?" Fendig coughed and took a deep breath, then forced himself to stand up straight. "Farzel!" he managed between breaths. "He just rode into town with a bunch of his men. He's going to the town hall for the mayor." "Bugger me," Julian breathed. "We're not ready for a showdown." Raedric nodded in agreement. "Let's hope it doesn't come down to that." Looking at the 4 remaining fishing men, he said, "You guys spread out on the street and be ready to cover us if it comes down to a fight." The 4 newcomers swallowed hard and nodded. Only Salam looked truly calm. The others looked ready to jump out of their skin. Julian couldn't blame them. It was far too early in the game for this sort of confrontation. And him all but crippled, too. It was enough to put the notion of flight into his head for a moment. Then he met Raedric's eyes and saw the same dread that he felt, but it was suppressed beneath a steely resolve. If he didn't know Raedric as well as he did, he would not have known he was anxious at all. But then, he always had been good at projecting calm. The 2 friends exchanged nods, and Raedric smiled thinly. "Let's get it done." Loosening his sword in his scabbard, Julian set off at a trot toward Town Hall, trying his best to jog through the twinges from his thigh.
All right, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, hey, Kingswood, I love that story. How can I buy your books? Great question. Here's the answer. Best way to buy my books is to come over to my site, michaelkingswood.com/store. That will bring you to this place, which is my company's store where you can get books, merchandise, all kinds of great stuff that I've set up. And but you're wondering how it works. Well, here, let's check out Glimmer Vale Chronicles, which is my heroic fantasy series that I've talked a lot about. If you haven't read it yet, you really should. It's a super fun series. Everything you would want. You should start with Glimmer Vale, which is the first book. Come over here to Glimmer Vale. It'll load up. Hey, look at that. You get the book description, links to other books in the series, great stuff. And you can pick the format you want. You got ebook, trade paperback, and audiobook. Not everything I've written is an audiobook yet, but almost everything's a trade paperback and everything's an ebook. But like, hey, I know what you're thinking. Hey, I'm buying from you. How do I get the ebook? There's a service that I work with called Book Funnel. When you buy from my site, they will send you a link. That link will lead you to a page where they will walk you through how to load your ebook onto the device you're choosing, or you can just download it to computer and do whatever you want with it. So that way it's easy peasy. Maximum profit for me. All kinds of fun for you. But I know, a lot of you guys, you like your Kindles, you like your other things, and you want to go straight to the retailer, and that's fine. You can come over here to michaelkingswood.com/books2read, the number 2. And I have this handy dandy universal book-like aggregator page set up. You can scroll through, look at all my stories, all my books, and pick which one you want, and then go from there. Here's how it works. Let's do Glimmer Vale again. So Glimmer Vale, first book in the series, you click on it, you get this thing, you get the book description, you get all other books in the series, and you say, get it now. Okay, get it now. Look what happens. Every retailer where you can find it is here. You can pick the one that you like best and say, okay, cool. Well, let's say I wanted to buy it in, I don't know, let's just say Kobo, because why not? Click on it. And then it'll ask you, is this your favorite store? If so, you set it. So every time you come back, you don't have to choose. It'll just go take you to your favorite store. But let's just, you don't have to do that. Well, we're going on to Kobo. Hoo-yah. Hey, look at this. Here it is on the Kobo site. People like it. People have bought it. Good stuff. Links to other things of mine. And, or you can do one of the other stores that you like. Either way, you get the book you like. I get money. It's all good.